911 dispatchers of Reddit, what are some of the dumbest calls you've gotten? My best call a while back was someone who called 911 because of a squirrel. It was at her front door and wouldn't go away. I asked her to make a lot of noise or chase it with a broom and to not call 911. I wasn't the dispatcher, but when I was an EMT we got called out around 1 AM for an uncontrolled bleed. We roll up, hop out, get greeted by a guy probably in his 70s standing at the door, calm as calm can be. Hey man, what's going on? Oh, nothing. I just had a nosebleed earlier, okay. Well it looks like it's not bleeding anymore. Yay. Oh no, it stopped around 5. Ooh, okay. Well are you feeling okay? You feel weak? Have any pain? etc. No I feel fine, but like, it bled a lot, but it stopped? Yay. And you feel fine? Yay. So, what's the problem then? IDK. Should I go see my doctor or something? Do you want to see your doctor? IDK. That's why I called you. Since we can't just frick off and leave without him agreeing, and us having no reason to transport him, vitals were fine. No real chief complaint. It took us and fire department talking to him for 30 freaking minutes at 1 in the morning to just have him agree that he would just see his doctor in the morning if he was that concerned about his nosebleed that had already stopped 8 hours earlier. I have been a call taker for the police and ambulance and there's always one that comes to mind when I get asked this question. It was about 2 AM on a weekday morning and a lady called up and said that there are badger trying to get out of her garden gate and it's making a bit of a racket keeping her awake. She's unwilling to go down there and open the gate for it because she's worried it will become aggressive with her and wants me to send an officer to open the gate. I repeat back to her, you want me to send a police officer to come and open your back gate to let a badger out, and this obviously had the desired effect of making her realize how ridiculous she was being because she just said, well you're not very helpful, are you, and hung up. I'm sure there have been many others but this is the one that really takes the biscuit. Emergency RN here. On the receiving end of those ambulances. Got a patient once whose mouth was sore from eating too much Cap'n Crunch. Not allergic, not swollen, just sore. Insisted on coming and despite M's reassurance. I'm fairly new to dispatching. Been doing it for the past year but I work for the largest city in my state. I've had a guy complaining of animals making loud noise. Not that dumb but he worked across the street from a zoo. Haha. Just today, I listened to a lady read a love letter she wrote to the officers that helped her, complete with a marriage proposition, for 6 minutes. And then last week, a concerned ex-husband was calling in because ex-wife locked herself in the garage with her vehicle running in a suicide attempt. The thing is, she drove a hybrid. I got a call one night about 3 AM. I hear a buzzing noise coming from my neighbor. I bet it's a lab. Sent an officer with the lowest of priorities. Turns out it was a celibate, not a lab. If you're wondering, yes, this was in Florida. Loud but celeb dang. No joke. An old lady called and complained about the black foreigners which were just going for a walk. There are so much people who call us about things which has nothing to do with us. And some people are really xenophobic. My dad was a cop in our small town in the 80s. He received a call from an old lady to inform him a black person had just been in her shop. On my first day in Sweden I didn't manage to figure out that the student apartment I'd rented was electronically locked, and so I called the number the housing office gave me for emergencies. Toll-free number. I didn't have a working SIM. Turns out it was the equivalent of 911. I was inadvertently the caller. I'm an attorney and I was trying to call my secretary to come into my office for something. I'm not terribly great at using our intercom phone system. Her call number was 11, and I thought you had to dial 9, like when dialing out. So without thinking, I dial 911. When the dispatcher answered, I immediately panicked and just hung up. Stupid of me, I know. Within 5 minutes, 2 city cops walked in the front door of my law office. We live in a small city so everyone basically knows everyone. At this point, I had to walk out of my office and fess up to what I did. The cops didn't think it was strange to get a call from my office because we've had to call many times in the past because of crazies coming into our office and being threatening for one reason or another. The cops still tease me about it to this day. And the running joke at my office is the staff better behave or I'll call 911. So embarrassing. Just last night I had a regular caller who requested a deputy to her home to bring her a glass of water because she claimed she couldn't move. I am not a dispatcher but I'm forced to watch lots of reality TV at home. There was one documentary about the night shift ambulance service in the NW of England. It featured the following classic, if culturally very specific, exchange. Caller describes finding drunk, injured youth collapsed in street. Dispatcher, where's he bleeding from? Caller, dunno. Blackpool, I think. Explanation for non-UK, the word bleeding, or more usual bleeding, can be used for mildly expletive emphasis as in the statement, don't state the bleeding obvious, M8. I work deep nights. Man calls in and says I was just laying in bed watching CNN and they were giving a report about ISIS. When out of nowhere this Middle Eastern guy bangs on my bedroom window and screams I'm with the terrorists and ran away. I didn't believe him at first until my officers got on scene and checked for warrants on our local crazy guy. Dude straight up snuck behind the thorny bushes at this guy's window to peek in at his TV and scare the crap out of him. Mission accomplished, crazy guy. Mission accomplished. A father requested an ambulance to take his son from one hospital's ED to go to another hospital's ED. Dad was upset because the nurses were trying to take a rectal temp from the boy and according to dad this was going to turn him gay. The boy was less than 2 years old and very sick. Dad was perfectly willing to delay his care several hours out of some of the most profound ignorance I have ever encountered. We did not send him an ambulance because that would have been illegal, but also because dad is a piece of crap. We did get the police and child protective services over there though, and the father was removed from the hospital for his violent behavior. I had a lady who wanted to help a lost dog who was in the road. She stopped, got out and let the dog inside her back seat. While she was walking around to get back in, the dog decided that car was now his freaking car and started aggressively defending it. She called 911 because she didn't know what else to do. Poor lady was just trying to help. I can kind of see calling 911 for that. Stupidest ever was a kid, teen, reporting his friend had passed out, was unresponsive and he was afraid they were dead. I asked if he could detect any breathing and the kid goes, I don't know, let me check. Hey, friend, are you breathing? Friend, no, anguished. Caller, he says no. What do I do? Me, tell him to start. Caller, she says start. Friend, ah yay, that's better. Caller, thanks lady. Welp, another life saved here s. Friend of mine who is an ambulance officer was called out because the caller couldn't breathe, as advised by the dispatcher. He turned up to the house to find it was on fire. The caller couldn't breathe because of all the smoke. Probably should have asked for the fire brigade and got out the heck out of there. There was someone else in this thread with the exact same story. Can't find it now but have a look. Maybe you'll find your friend. Dispatcher for an alarm company. One time had this guy call because he wanted me to send the police. He was outside his house and saw that the front door was open. So he called us to have us call the police. Why couldn't he do it himself, you ask? Well, because that's what we're here for. Kicker, he didn't even use our services, so I could not dispatch the police for him. That guy wasted 7 minutes on the phone arguing with me. I had a caller 2 weeks ago who excitedly wanted to report an UFO. The deputy gets there and calls in that it was the lights on the water tower. I'm not a dispatcher but I was the one to make a call. I was in kindergarten when we learned about community helpers and 911 a few days before my story begins. So, we had a German shepherd named Suzy who, I'm still convinced, was my mum's favorite child. Suzy was a puppy and she loved running up the stairs, darting into my sister's room and frolic. My sister despised dogs at the time and would make a huge fuss over Suzy being in the house, let alone her precious sanctuary. So, Suzy is rolling around in my sister's room while my sister is angrily storming downstairs to fetch my mum. I've now made my way into my sister's room to roll around the floor with Suzy. My mum walks in, steps over my convulsing body, picks up a dejected puppy and heads towards the stairs. Now, if any of you have ever had puppies, know that when they're being carried when they want to play, they'll squirm, jump out of your arms, continue playing, When Suzy began squirming, my mum panicked and tried to hold onto the puppy, but they ended up flipping head over heels and tumbled down the stairs. There was a cacophony of banging, whimpering and ouch. From the top of the stairs, I saw mum and puppy laying lifeless at the bottom. I remembered my teacher's instructions being, remain calm, dial 911, and explain exactly what happened. So that's what I did. My mum fell down the stairs and she hasn't moved. I think she's dead. And I hung up. Since I had saved the day, I went into the kitchen to make myself a hero's meal. A bowl of Lucky Charms. I wasn't allowed to use the kitchen since I nearly set the kitchen on fire. But that's another story for another day. A few moments later, my mum walks into the kitchen gingerly followed by a dazed puppy. I didn't look up from my cereal when I said, "Oh, you're alive." My mum was about to say something when the phone rang. It was the dispatcher and she was livid. She scolded my mum saying I shouldn't have made a false claim and I wasted everybody's time blah blah blah. My mum was quite proud of me for being eerily calm during the whole thing. I answer the 911 call and all I hear is a woman screaming and yelling for help. I can't make out anything she is saying except get out of my house. We use her GPS and send the cavalry because it sounds like she is being murdered. First officers arrive and can hear the screaming from the parking lot, so the apartment was easy to find. They run in, guns drawn, and kick the cheap butt apartment door in. Inside they find a grown woman standing on her coffee table, incoherent and still screaming. They quickly got to the root of the problem. She had a snake in her kitchen sink. Had a gentleman call regarding suspicious activity at the community mailbox. Described a man that would arrive roughly the same time throughout the week and place things in all the boxes. I feel bad in this sense. I called 911 because I heard noises in the front room. I live alone. Apparently they were just wind noises because in Southern Cali, we get the Santa Ana winds. But since I lived alone I had no idea who was making that noise. So I called 911. First time, since I valued my life. 3 police cars arrived. Nobody around. I feel bad. I don't, but my friend does. We had really bad snow recently and it's quite unusual where I'm from. She got a call from a couple who were stranded far out in the countryside and demanded to be picked up. Their car heater didn't work. They were wearing bathrobes and had no food supplies, no shovel to dig themselves out, etc. They wanted to go for a drive because the snow was pretty. LOL. I had a buddy who had a massive freaking panic attack and called 911 screaming about how he forgot how to breathe. Poor guy was training to be a lawyer and just freaked out before one of his big tests. It was good that he called and it wasn't like he didn't believe it. It was just a very odd couple of minutes. I wouldn't say that's a dumb call. Panic attacks get mistaken for heart attacks all the time. Breathing problems. Heartbeat gets weird. It's understandable that he thought there was actually something physically wrong with him. First time I had one I thought I was dying. I didn't call emergency services because I'm too awkward. Not an operator, but someone once called 911 because my grandfather was walking his dog off leash. He also took my grandfather's cane to keep him there until the police came. One word, that person. See. I work as a dispatcher at a hotel in Seattle. About once every other week I have to call 911 because someone ate too many edibles and think they are dying. I once called the police thinking someone was attempting to break into my house because I could hear rattling and scratching coming from my laundry room in the garage where the crawl space accesses. I know you can get in this way because I've locked myself out and had to do it before. So anyway, I call the cops and when they show up I feel safe enough to open my door and investigate. About 6 armadillos parade out from under the house. I am being pulled over by one of you people and I demand to know why. The list of things I wanted to respond with was near limitless, the majority of which would have gotten me fired. Not me, but I had a dispatcher friend who had a call. A passerby on the sidewalk heard screaming. Turns out a couple was getting frisky. The wife was tied up on the bed, naked, and her husband was nude except for a Superman cape. He jumped up to get on the bed, hit his head on the ceiling fan and knocked himself out cold. The wife started screaming, and the passerby checked it out and called the police. Superman has been defeated by none other than Superfin. I heard about a lady who called the police because there was a spider on the door handle of her car. This was in Australia, so they sent out 3 cop cars and an ambulance just in case. It must have only been a small spider, as they normally send the fire brigade as well to extinguish the car fire after the cops torch it. I had a co-worker call 911 because he forgot to pay his light bill and he deemed it an emergency. He thought 911 meant every kind of emergency. He still argues his point, lol. I take 000 calls, the Australian equivalent. Ambulance only. Man calls up, audibly distressed, with the complaint I can't fart. Called to say that the paramedics left their biro behind and would they like to come back and get it. Calls for a person who had left the scene and was traveling on foot. This woman wanted me to send an ambulance to an intersection where the person might be walking to, or to a bus stop he might board a bus from. She wasn't sure which. I explained that I can't send an ambulance to chase a bus. Mother, highly panicked, for her child who swallowed a marble. No symptoms. Not choking. Woman who wanted an ambulance crew to come get her off the couch because she sprained her ankle and her GP told her not to put weight on it. That's just from today. I work for a police department but not a dispatcher. I get a lot of calls that I have to transfer to dispatch. Anyways, lady calls asking to speak with an officer. She stated that she got a call from someone stating that she has a warrant and she needs to pay her bond of $2,000 in iTunes cards. The lady had already bought the amount but wanted to check to make sure that she had a warrant. I used to work at an answering service and we got a lot of emergency type calls that I had to dispatch. Many of which were old people who didn't want to bother anybody. Just let the doctor know I'm not feeling well on Monday. Don't ruin his weekend when they're very clearly having a heart attack or a stroke. I had to convince several of these people to call 911, but many wouldn't unless their doctor said to. Such is the state of insurance around here. Some of the doctors on that end of emergency calls are weird too. One cardiologist told me he was on call for emergencies only and that if I couldn't do my job right he would hire a monkey to do it better. To which my response was, the call is from the chief of medicine at hospital, sir. It's a code blue, which means the patient is actively dying. And even if that weren't already a stat call, they stated it's a stat call, which you are correct isn't quite an emergency. It's an emergency on steroids. So would you like me to tell the chief of medicine that you are refusing the call because you're very busy at the country club, sir? Which I know sounds like not an appropriate way to speak to a doctor, but I was the supervisor and had airtight job security, and anyone who listened to that call would have sided with me, so I felt fine with it. EMT and dispatcher for a private company with several 911 contracts since 2011. Everything under the sun from common cold to not being able to sleep. People driving calling in to let us know that somebody they saw walking looks sick. They usually refuse to give us a call back or an address, so pretty literally just calling to let us know. One of our homeless regulars jumped out of a dumpster to mug somebody and stubbed his toe landing. Constipation. The panicked rollover that was just a kid who fell off his big wheel. And yes, he got fire, rescue, police, and ALS sent to him. There was no language barrier. Numerous calls for people fainting in church after finding Jesus, typically on Sundays. There are hundreds if not thousands of others. These were just the first to came to mind. I also want to take a second to elaborate a bit. I spend most of my time servicing an extremely poor community gripped by addiction, violence, and racism. And while everything I've listed is a ridiculous reason to call 911 for medical aid and probably a bit humorous, I think it's important to remember how little these people have. It feels like the majority of the city is unemployed. Most of them don't have a high school education. They live in a world where violence is on every corner. There are a lot of things they can't handle by themselves, or how you or I would probably handle it, because they haven't had the opportunities you or I have had. A lot of them are also immigrants who live and work with only other immigrants and speak almost no English. The concept of 911 here doesn't translate well to them. You or I think if there is a dire emergency to call. To them it's a culture of if you have a problem, any problem, call. And it's hard to re-educate. We can't exactly get a bunch of the first responders at a public meeting and announce stop calling us for this crap. So we essentially have to find teachable moments on nonsense calls and try one person at a time. which is a losing fight in a city of 100,000. Inaho. Just something to think about before you read one from this thread and think what a freaking idiot. You are the right person for your job, sir. The community is lucky to have you. Not a dispatcher. So this is only anecdotally. A few years back my whole region was experiencing a blackout. People were calling emergency to ask what to do with the steaks in their freezers. Now that they were defrosting, this resulted in public statements afterward telling people to not call asking stupid questions like that. Hey, I saw a cat. Okay, go on. Well, it's inside this house across the street from me looking out the window. Alright, so what is your concern exactly? Well, I just think an officer should check it out. Make sure it's okay. Was actually the dispatchee, but this call did come in on 911. A call for a 20-something-year-old female with neck pain. I'm thinking, oh crap, what if this is meningitis? But no. The caller, her boyfriend, says they've been sitting on the couch in an uncomfortable position for a while. So we sent an ambulance anyways and just cleared the scene after patient education. Facepalm. Not a dispatcher but was working 911 calls an evening covering someone on break. Got a call from an irate older gentleman saying that because of the wind a piece of cardboard flew from his neighbor's bin and landed in his garden. I explained that he could go outside and pick it up and put it in his own bin or indeed the neighbor's if he wanted to. He refused and wanted to press charges for trespassing. I had to hang up the call 15 minutes later and explain that this was a non-emergency call. Some people. Happened to my dad. A man phoned the police on a Saturday night complaining that his Chinese was closed and the police should do something about it. My dad was not in the mood and tore strips off this guy saying it was not a police matter at all. I think it even made our local newspaper. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.